The story unfolds through a series of flashbacks, gradually revealing the intricate details of two distinct relationships that eventually become intertwined. During a captivating performance of Café Muller, a mesmerizing dance theater production, two individuals, Benigno Martin and Marco Zuluaga, find themselves seated side by side, equally entranced by the unfolding spectacle before them. As they become engrossed in the performance, a remarkable connection begins to form between them, even though they are essentially strangers. In a poignant moment, Benigno notices Marco's eyes welling up with tears, seemingly moved by the emotions evoked by the performance. Little do they know that this shared experience will set the foundation for a deeper connection that will later blossom. Returning to the hospital where he works, Benigno continues his routine of caring for a patient who lies in a coma. However, he takes a unique approach to this duty by recounting the details of the Café Muller production to the comatose patient, sharing his observations, and even going as far as purchasing a backstage photograph along with an autograph for her. The autograph, written in English, serves as a tangible memento of the outside world that he brings into her otherwise isolated existence. As the story progresses, Benigno and another caretaker tend to the patient's needs, bathing her with gentle care. Through this process, it becomes evident that the woman in the coma is still quite young, as she continues to experience her menstrual cycles, even in her unconscious state. This detail adds to the complexity of her situation and deepens the viewer's understanding of her prolonged vulnerability. As Benigno's shift nears its end, he learns that a fellow nurse is facing personal difficulties due to her husband leaving her to manage the household and children on her own. In an act of selflessness, Benigno agrees to extend his shift, covering for his colleague and offering her much-needed support during a challenging time. After watching the mesmerizing Café Muller performance, Marco, who's a journalist, heads home and tunes into a talk show on TV. The show features Lydia Gonzalez, a gutsy female bullfighter. Lydia gets annoyed, as the host keeps pestering her with offensive questions she refuses to answer. Intrigued, Marco gives someone a call, expressing his desire to craft a compelling story about Lydia's life. Meanwhile, Lydia continues to pursue her bullfighting passion. In the bullring, she faces down a fierce bull, deftly handling its attempts to provoke an aggressive charge with the red flag. Marco observes one of her fights up close, while others around him label Lydia's fearless approach as bordering on madness. One man in the crowd seems linked to Lydia personally, hinting at a complex relationship. Later on, Marco takes to shadowing Lydia, keeping a close eye on her. At one point, Lydia chats with an older man about someone known as the Kid. The details remain hazy, leaving uncertainty about whether the kid is a young boy or something else entirely. Despite the ambiguity, Lydia remains persistent in her interest. After the conversation, she heads to the bar for drinks, providing Marco an opening to approach her and ask for a quick chat. Lydia agrees to talk, but only if Marco gives her a ride to Madrid. Playfully, she links arms with him, and they move to a more private spot. During their conversation, Marco kicks off an interview, starting with the story behind Lydia's name. She shares that her father gave her the name, and fondly recounts his unwavering support for her bullfighting ambitions. As the chat unfolds, Marco unveils his plan to create a story about Lydia for El País magazine. However, he clarifies that he's not interested in her bullfighting exploits, but rather in her life as a woman. This reveals that the Kid, mentioned on TV and during her talk with the older man, is someone called Valencia Kid, with whom Lydia shares a relationship. Lydia isn't too pleased with Marco's intentions, expressing her irritation with magazines prying into her personal life. Annoyed, she brushes Marco off, telling him not to bother with the story. Marco drops Lydia off at her home, and as he begins to turn the car around, a piercing scream, a scream worthy of horror movies, echoes from Lydia's house. Marco quickly reverses and witnesses Lydia emerging, crying and screaming in distress. She rushes over to his car, frantic to convey that there's a snake in her kitchen. Lydia rushes back to the car, tears streaming down her face, to explain that a snake has found its way into her kitchen. In his usual composed manner, Marco calmly asks Lydia for the keys to her house, intending to address the situation. Stepping into Lydia's home, he searches for a bat, and soon locates the snake. With determined efficiency, Marco dispatches the snake, despite not knowing how to contact wild animal specialists. While dealing with the snake, a single tear falls for the unfortunate creature. Marco respectfully places the snake's lifeless body into a trash bag. Once finished, he exits the house, discarding the snake's remains, and returns Lydia's purse to her. Lydia, still shaken, turns to Marco once again, asking for his chauffeuring assistance. She needs a ride to a hotel, where she plans to stay temporarily. Together, Marco and Lydia arrive at the hotel. Lydia earnestly implores Marco to keep her fear of snakes confidential, seeking reassurance that he won't share this personal detail. Marco readily agrees, giving his word that her secret is safe with him. Touched by Marco's understanding, Lydia begins contemplating the idea of allowing Marco to create a story about her. As they bid each other farewell, Marco extends a gracious offer. He suggests staying longer if Lydia wishes. However, Lydia politely declines, assuring him that it's unnecessary. Returning to Benigno, he wakes up and proceeds to his workplace. He begins his day by tending to his patient, gently washing her hair. It's revealed that Benigno possesses another skill. He's a beautician. With a tender touch, he trims the hair of the comatose patient, styling it the same way as when she was admitted to the hospital. Benigno's unwavering belief in miracles becomes evident as he performs these caring gestures, holding on to hope that one day, she will wake up. Later on, Marco makes a call to Lydia. In a lighthearted tone, Lydia jests that she's practically in her birthday suit, humorously indicating her vulnerability. She invites Marco to accompany her on a shopping trip for new clothes. Lydia explains to Marco that he might find it a bit peculiar that she's avoiding her own house after the unsettling snake incident. She adds a reassuring note that her behavior isn't as odd as it might seem. Marco, showing his open-mindedness, responds warmly. He shares a personal anecdote, revealing that when he went through a separation with his wife, he ended up sleeping on the couch and even changed the sheets, an intimate glimpse into his own life and experiences. A few months down the line, Marco and Lydia have become more than just friends, they've become lovers. But there's a serious conversation on the horizon, one that Lydia believes they need to have after her upcoming bullfight. Meanwhile, Marco pays a visit to a woman who shares unsettling stories about nuns facing attacks by priests in Africa. As the time for the bullfight draws near, Lydia gets geared up in her bullfighting outfit. With Marco in the crowd, you can feel the tension building up. When the bull is set loose, things take a grim turn as it charges straight at Lydia, ramming into her and leaving her battered and bloody, lying unconscious. The scene is a nightmare for Lydia's friends, family, and fellow bullfighting crew. The injuries she sustains are serious, and weeks go by with Lydia still in a coma. 3 weeks later, she remains unresponsive. In the midst of all this, the sister has to head over to Cordoba. Through this tough stretch, Marco stands firmly by Lydia's side. He takes it upon himself to look after the medallions that Lydia always wears, holding on to that connection. Soon, Valencia Kid makes an appearance, seemingly disregarding Marco's presence. The tension between them is palpable. Valencia Kid mulls over a trip to America, torn between his feelings for Lydia and his own plans. The unresolved tension between him and Lydia plays a role in his decision. Marco points out that Lydia hasn't brought up Valencia Kid for quite some time, shedding light on a different side of their relationship. In the midst of this trying period, Marco doesn't budge from Lydia's side, even staying with her throughout the night. As the music starts to captivate the crowd, Marco watches with emotions welling up, tears streaming down his face once more. The scene shifts to a flashback with Marco and Lydia sharing a moment before the tragic accident. Marco lingers to absorb the music's effect, leaving Lydia to enjoy it as he steps away. Outside, Marco wipes his tears and takes a moment to smoke. Eventually, Lydia appears, gently embracing Marco from behind. Touched by the music, Marco explains that the tears were triggered by memories. Years ago, he had slain the same snake that reminded him of the incident at Lydia's house. His former partner, who shared the same snake phobia, used to flee to escape it when they were in Africa. This memory of his partner's vulnerability brings forth his tears. Lydia reveals her dislike for the woman, expressing her wish for Marco to forget about her. Marco reassures Lydia that whatever she's doing, he's already moving on from his past. Their emotions intertwine, leading them to share a passionate kiss. As morning arrives, Marco awakens to the sight of 2 nurses tending to Lydia. He heads to the doctor's office, but before he does, he discreetly glances into another room and catches sight of Alicia, prompting her eyes to unexpectedly open. Startled, Marco quickly withdraws. Approaching the doctor, Marco inquires about Lydia's prognosis and whether she will pull through. The doctor shows other case studies, revealing instances where patients have awakened after years of being in a coma. However, he explains that while parts of Lydia's brain have been damaged, she might perform basic functions like breathing, without experiencing feelings or thoughts. Essentially, the doctor conveys that Lydia's situation is incredibly dire and unlikely to improve. Later on, Marco passes by Alicia's room and catches the attention of Benigno, who invites him to come in. Benigno introduces Marco to Alicia, and as Marco takes in the scene, he notices the keepsakes adorning Alicia's bedside. Benigno recalls recognizing Marco from their seats next to each other at the Café Muller production. He mentions how memorable it was, because he distinctly remembers Marco shedding tears during the performance. Amid Benigno's attentive care for Alicia, Mr. Rincero, Alice's father, enters the room seeking some information. Their conversation takes an unexpected turn as Mr. Rincero inquires about Benigno's orientation. Benigno recalls their last encounter, during which he shared that he was a lonely virgin. However, he now openly states that he is gay, and expresses that having a partner or not is not a concern for him. He chats with another nurse, and spills the beans about Mr. Rincero's inquiry. Yet Benigno confesses that he fabricated the claim of being gay. Meanwhile, outside, Marco indulges in a smoke. On the other side of the room, Benigno engages in conversation with Alicia's teacher. The topic revolves around a ballet performance, uncovering Alicia's identity as a dancer. Amid the discussion, the elderly woman delves into a rather esoteric subject. Katerina, Alicia's teacher, showers her with affectionate kisses, highlighting their close bond. Later, Marco steps into the room, curious about the woman who just left. Benigno describes Katerina, Alicia's teacher, as a truly unique individual. He goes on to mention that Katerina's school happens to be situated right near Benigno's own home. The scene shifts back 4 years ago, where the focus is on Benigno spying on Alicia. It becomes evident that Benigno harbors an obsession for her. Benigno resides with his ailing mother and dedicates his days to covertly observing Alicia. During one instance, Alicia steps out, accidentally dropping her wallet. This becomes his opportunity to get closer to her. He follows Alicia, but she perceives his actions as stalking. However, Benigno manages to return Alicia's wallet, bringing delight to her. He takes it a step further by offering to escort her back home. As they walk together, Alicia and Benigno engage in conversation, sharing aspects of their lives. Alicia reveals her fervor for dancing and other interests. Benigno opens up about his own life, disclosing that he lost his mother a few months ago, after caring for her over an extended period. The revelation resonates with Alicia, who has also experienced the loss of her mother. Upon arriving at Alicia's residence, Benigno surreptitiously continues to follow her as she enters her building. To his surprise, he discovers that the location is actually the psychiatric office of Mr. Rincero, Alicia's father. Benigno spends the entire day observing, but unexpectedly, Alicia fails to show up. This prompts Benigno to take action. He contacts Mr. Rincero's office to arrange an appointment with the doctor. When the time arrives, Benigno heads to Dr. Rincero's clinic, driven by his desire to see Alicia once more. Aware that the office and their home are one and the same, he arranges an appointment, sharing with the doctor that he spent the last 15 years caring for his mother. He even pursued nursing and cosmetology courses to better care for her. As for his father, he's alive but absent from their lives, residing in Sweden after a divorce. Dr. Rincero inquires about Benigno's purpose for visiting. Benigno candidly admits that his loneliness has driven him there. The doctor's questions delve deeper, touching on Benigno's sexuality. Benigno reveals he's a virgin. Dr. Rincero proposes another meeting in a week's time to further study Benigno, citing his unusual adolescence. As Benigno exits the office, he finds the secretary's desk empty. Seizing the opportunity, he explores the premises, eventually hearing the sound of a shower. His curiosity leads him to Alicia's room, where he enters. He takes a hair clip, and as he leaves, he unexpectedly encounters Alicia, just out of the shower. Benigno reassures her of his harmless intent and departs. Benigno continues to keep a lookout for Alicia's appearance. However, news reaches Katerina that an accident has occurred. Despite having met with the Rinceros just the previous week, Benigno finds himself encountering Alicia again in the hospital. Due to rainy weather, Alicia was involved in a car accident. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Dr. Rincero seeks continuous care for Alicia and meticulously vets potential nurses. Benigno's favorable reputation leads him to be recommended for the task. Interestingly, Dr. Rincero recalls who Benigno is, yet still decides to hire him. Benigno continues his narrative, sharing with Marco his journey of attending ballet shows, and recounting that the 4 years spent caring for Alicia have been his happiest. He reveals another facet of his interests, his penchant for watching silent films, a preference influenced by Alicia's liking. In contrast, Marco details his own experiences, which stand in stark contrast due to Lydia's fragile state. The delicate condition prevents Marco from physical touch. Benigno suggests that talking to her is still worthwhile, as he believes that a woman's mind can comprehend, even while unconscious. Marco, though skeptical, questions Benigno's expertise on women. Benigno confidently responds, pointing out his 2 decades of experience in caring for women. Within the break room, nurses engage in discussions about patients and those by their sides, particularly focusing on Benigno. The conversation veers toward his close involvement with the patient, though their concerns are eased upon realizing Benigno's orientation, deeming it a non-issue. Benigno crosses paths with Marco again, and extends an invitation to go to the movies. Later, he notices Lydia's lips and skin are dry, prompting him to apply Vaseline. He encourages Marco to communicate with Lydia, even while she's in a coma. Benigno watches the movies alone, finding solace in them. Returning to Alicia, Benigno proceeds to give her a massage, but a surge of emotion halts him. He attributes it to the impact of the movie he has just seen. As he tends to Alicia, he takes on the role of storyteller, recounting the plot of the film to her, which is, by the way, a bit perverted and weird. A month later, Marco and Benigno coordinate to seat Alicia and Lydia next to each other. Their growing friendship is evident, as the 2 men work together to arrange this. Benigno shares his belief that women can sense and understand everything, a perspective that Marco observes when he notices Benigno conversing with Lydia. However, Marco considers this viewpoint absurd, maintaining his more pessimistic stance. The narrative takes a flashback to a wedding ceremony attended by Marco, and Lydia. Lydia expresses her fondness for weddings, prompting them to visit Lydia's sister. Unexpectedly, they find themselves at Marco's former flame Angela's wedding. This event takes place just a day before Lydia's tragic accident. During the trip, Marco opens up about his relationship with Angela, recounting how they used to travel extensively to help her escape her struggles with drugs. He reflects on the painful nature of love once it's over. Upon his return to the hospital, Marco encounters Valencia Kid speaking to Lydia and holding her. Valencia Kid discloses that he and Lydia have reconciled, planning to reunite after a month, but he entrusts Marco with maintaining their relationship. Marco realizes that this might be the reason behind Lydia's tears. Accepting the situation without resistance, he turns to Alicia to pour out his feelings. During this time, Marco notices Alicia's physical changes. Benigno arrives, and Marco informs him about his breakup with Lydia. Benigno's response suggests that he foresaw this outcome, a testament to his keen understanding. Marco is preparing to embark on a trip, in an effort to clear his mind. As he sets off, a nurse arrives and notices a discrepancy in Alicia's chart. Her menstruation cycle is irregular, with her period being 2 weeks late. Benigno steps in to reassure her that Alicia did indeed have her period, even assisting her with placing a pad. The nurse further observes that Alicia appears bloated, an uncommon occurrence for someone in a coma. Later, Marco meets up with Benigno at a restaurant. Prior to departing, Marco makes a stop by Lydia's area to bid farewell. However, he inadvertently overhears Dr. Vega closing off Alicia's room. Benigno informs Marco that Alicia is dealing with an infection, and medical tests are underway to address the issue. In the midst of their interaction, Marco hands over travel guides he has authored to Benigno. These guides detail journeys to daring and far-flung destinations. In a startling revelation, Benigno confides in Marco about his desire to get married. When pressed for details, Benigno drops an even more astonishing bombshell. He intends to marry Alicia. This revelation shocks Marco to his core, given that Alicia is incapacitated and unable to provide consent for marriage, let alone comprehend the situation due to her coma. After this revelation, Marco offers Benigno a ride, and during the journey, he attempts to reason with him. Marco imparts the idea that talking to Alicia in a monologue is acceptable, as it's akin to conversing with plants. He emphasizes the importance of recognizing Alicia's inability to actively engage in the relationship. However, Benigno remains steadfast in his belief, asserting that he shares a profound connection and relationship with Alicia. Tempers flare as Marco becomes increasingly frustrated. He sternly advises Benigno to abandon this idea, highlighting the potential for trouble and controversy that such an unconventional aspiration could bring. Despite Marco's fervent plea, Benigno remains unswayed. The conversation continues, with Marco venting his frustration by asserting that Alicia is essentially in a state of unconsciousness, rendering her unable to make any decisions. Later, a shocking revelation emerges. Alicia has been exploited, and has become pregnant while in her comatose state. This distressing news prompts the authorities to seek out the perpetrator responsible for this reprehensible act. Dr. Vega is tasked with shedding light on the situation, and Nurse Rosa comes forward with crucial information. Rosa reports that she hasn't experienced her menstrual cycle for several months. Curiously, the medical chart contradicts this claim, indicating that she only missed 1 month and received regular sanitary pad applications. Rosa is quick to clarify that she couldn't have written the chart entry herself, as she was absent due to flu. Upon inspection, it becomes evident that the handwriting on the chart is notably similar to Benigno's. This discovery thrusts Benigno into the spotlight as a possible suspect. Under scrutiny, Benigno acknowledges that he indeed authored the entry and, furthermore, falsified it. His reasoning, however misguided, was to prevent unnecessary alarm, as he believed that other patients were similarly experiencing missed or halted periods. Rosa's concurrence notwithstanding, the head of the department seeks additional perspectives from fellow nurses. Unfortunately, one nurse was facing familial challenges, leading her to be unable to cover her shifts. This revelation inadvertently shed light on Benigno's consistent night shifts, filling the room with whispers of suspicion centered around him. The head's exasperation escalates, fueled by an intention to divulge Benigno's role in Alicia's care to her father. Dr. Vega intervenes to diffuse the tension, engaging in a one-on-one discussion with Benigno. During this conversation, Dr. Vega directly addresses the mounting doubts, underscoring that Benigno's close proximity to Alicia and his alteration of her medical records have made him a prime focus of suspicion. Subsequently, another nurse comes forward, revealing a crucial piece of information gleaned from an overheard conversation between Benigno and Marco. This conversation revolved around Benigno's audacious desire to wed Alicia. The nurse, recounting the entirety of that conversation, injects a palpable sense of unease into the air, causing Benigno to shake and his forehead to sweat. In a distant corner of the world, Marco finds himself alone on a shore, engrossed in perusing newspapers. From the pages, he learns the disheartening news that Lydia has passed away and been laid to rest. Filled with a mix of emotions, Marco takes action, dialing Benigno's number through the hospital reception. However, the receptionists deliver the unexpected revelation that Benigno is no longer associated with the hospital. Undeterred, Marco inquires about Rosa and is swiftly connected to her. Seeking solace and answers, Marco delves into the matter concerning Lydia. His expectations are met with disappointment, as he discovers that nobody reached out to inform him of her passing. Rosa candidly reveals that the hospital is currently engulfed in turmoil, adding to Marco's sense of disarray. In his search for Benigno, Rosa discloses that he is incarcerated. The truth stings. Benigno has been accused of Alicia. As the weight of the revelation settles in, Marco finds himself grappling with disbelief. However, he encounters resistance when seeking help from those around him. Amidst this turmoil, Rosa emphasizes a plea for assistance. She points out that it is only Marco who holds the potential to aid Benigno, as he stands as Benigno's sole friend. Back in Spain, Marco makes his way to a prison in Segovia, where Benigno is confined. The prison, unfortunately, is off-limits for visitors. Undeterred, Marco provides his personal contact number as an alternative means of communication. As anticipated, Benigno reaches out by phone. He expresses the desire to meet on an upcoming city, all while harboring a keen curiosity about Alicia's well-being and the state of her unborn child. A revelation unfolds. Alicia's father has transferred her to a different hospital, although the exact location remains undisclosed. Nevertheless, Marco assures Benigno that he will honor the planned meeting. The fateful day arrives when Benigno and Marco finally come face to face. However, in an unexpected twist, Benigno's demeanor takes on an unsettling edge, resembling that of a psychopath. Dr. Roncero subsequently diagnoses Benigno as such, painting a disturbing picture of his mental state. Despite this, Benigno unflinchingly declares that he will stop at nothing to be by Alicia's side. It's a moment of tension, with Marco attempting to reason with him, urging him to reconsider his stance. In an unexpected turn, Benigno entrusts his home to Marco, revealing a poignant detail. He recalls thinking of Marco during his nights spent engrossed in travel guides. Among the destinations, Havana stands out as a favorite, a place where Benigno sees shades of himself. Later, he arrives at Benigno's place, intending to rent a room. He skillfully evades the nosy concierge and slips into the room. There he notices a collection of Alicia's photos, which underscores Benigno's intense obsession with her, amplified by the dance school conveniently located nearby. It's a realization that resonates deeply with Marco. Within the same context, he catches sight of Alicia in the midst of a dance class, fully awake and present. Tears well in her eyes as she absorbs the scene before her. Caterina, the instructor, extends a warm welcome, and despite using crutches, Alicia is actively engaged in her rehabilitation exercises under Caterina's guidance. Through Benigno's lawyer, Marco receives surprising news. Alicia experienced a stillborn birth. The lawyer advises him not to share this with Benigno, who remains unaware of both the baby's existence and Alicia's ongoing recovery. Subsequently, a voicemail from Benigno comes in, revealing his struggle to cope without Alicia and his decision to take off. Marco rushes to the prison, only to find a farewell letter from Benigno. In a poignant moment, Marco visits Benigno's final resting place, sharing the truth about the stillbirth and Alicia's progress. The movie reaches a full circle in the theater. Alicia and Caterina occupy seats a few rows behind Marco. As the dance performance unfolds before them, Marco glances back, catching a glimpse of Alicia's radiant smile.